Imagine being so loyal that you can't even lie to save yourself. So honest that you tell your brother his fortress would fall and create a rivalry that nearly destroys both your legions. So dedicated that after your father dies, you torture yourself for decades trying to figure out how you failed him. Now imagine the same loyalty, the same rigidity, the same inability to bend, and realize it got you killed. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe you're still out there somewhere, still fighting, still unable to accept that sometimes being perfect isn't possible. That's Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, the Primarch who built the Imperium's greatest fortress and watched it fall anyways. The Gene Father of the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, warriors so stubborn they'd rather die than retreat, so rigid they'd rather break than bend. Welcome back. Today we talk about the price of perfection, the weight of duty, and what happens when being right destroys everything that you love. When Rogal Dorn crashed on the world of Inwit, he landed on a frozen hell of ice hives and perpetual winter. But unlike Leman Russ, who was raised by wolves, or Jagatai, who was raised by nomads, Dorn was found by civilization itself. He was adopted by the patriarch of one of Inwit's ice castes, a man who became as close to a grandfather as any Primarch ever had. This man taught young Rogal about tactics, about leadership, about the responsibilities of rule. Dorn absorbed it all with the intensity that would later define his entire existence. But here's what shaped Rogal Dorn forever. Inwit was a world where survival depended on absolute discipline. One mistake in the ice hives meant death. One structural flaw in your fortress meant your entire clan froze. There was no room for creativity, no space for flexibility. You followed the proven methods or you died. Dorn learned that rules existed for a reason, that discipline was survival, that tradition was tested knowledge, and he internalized this so completely that he became unable to see any other way. By the time Dorn reached adulthood, he'd united not just Inwit, but the entire surrounding system, the Inwit cluster. He ruled as Emperor of the House of Dorn, commanding from the bridge of a massive starship called the Phalanx, one of the largest vessels ever constructed by human hands during the dark age of technology. When the Emperor arrived, Dorn greeted him at the helm of this vessel. The Emperor was so impressed that he gave the Phalanx back to Dorn, making it the fortress monastery of the Imperial Fists, the only legion to possess such a mobile battle station. And Dorn knelt, not because he recognized his father, not because he felt his destiny, but because the Emperor represented everything Dorn believed in: order, structure, and the supremacy of human civilization. Dorn was the 7th Primarch found, and he commanded the 7th Legion with absolute, unwavering discipline. Where other legions had personality, the Imperial Fists had efficiency. Where others had flair, they had results. But here's what the Imperium won't tell you. Dorn had one fatal flaw. He couldn't lie. Not wouldn't, couldn't. He was constitutionally incapable of deception, even when it would have helped, even when it would have saved lives. He saw the truth as absolute, as sacred, as more important than feelings or consequences or even diplomacy. And that honesty would eventually cost him everything. During the Great Crusade, the Imperial Fist became known for two things: fortifications and compliance. They didn't just conquer worlds, they secured them. They built fortresses, established governance, stayed until the systems were stable. Where the World Eaters would burn through a planet in days, the Imperial Fist would take months, but when they left, that world stayed loyal. Where other legions sought glory, the Fists sought permanence. Dorn became the Emperor's master architect. When fortifications needed to be built, when defenses needed to be designed, and when a strong point needed to be absolutely unbreakable, you would call Rogal Dorn. And he was good at it, perhaps the best that ever lived. His fortresses were mathematical perfection, fields of fire calculated to microns, killing zones optimized for maximum efficiency, and redundant systems ensuring that even catastrophic damage wouldn't compromise his defense. When the Emperor returned to Terra to build his capital, he brought Dorn with him, and Dorn was given the greatest commission any architect could receive: to design the defenses for the Imperial Palace itself. Dorn spent years on this task, and the result was magnificent. A fortress encompassing an entire continent, with walls hundreds of meters thick, weapon systems that could crack continents, and defenses that theoretically made it the most impregnable structure in the galaxy. But here is where Dorn made his mistake. Fulgrim, trying to make conversation, asked Dorn a simple question. Could the Imperial Palace withstand an assault by the Iron Warriors? Any other Primarch would have given a diplomatic answer, would have praised their brother while defending their work, and they would have avoided creating any sort of conflict. But Dorn answered with an honest, absolute yes. Just that simple, something direct and true. But Perturabo heard it as an insult. The master of siege warfare being told by the master of fortifications that his skills weren't good enough, that he couldn't even crack what Dorn had built, caused a rivalry that nearly led to a war between the legions. Later, Dorn would reflect that this competitive relationship was one of his few weaknesses, that perhaps he should have been more diplomatic. But Dorn couldn't change. He was what he was, honest to the point of cruelty, direct to the point of insult, and incapable of the small social lies that make relationships work. He also clashed with Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter. When Fulgrim told Dorn about Kurz's visions of the Horus Heresy, Dorn kept the secret, even from Kurz himself, until they were on a joint mission. When he finally confronted his brother, it nearly destroyed their relationship. Dorn believed in duty over feelings, in order over compassion, in structure over flexibility. When the heresy came, those beliefs would be tested to destruction. When the word of Horus's betrayal reached Terra, it came from Captain Nathaniel Garrow aboard the damaged frigate Einstein. Dorn didn't want to believe it, refused to believe it at first. But when the evidence became undeniable, Dorn didn't hesitate. He dispatched most of his legion to Istvan on a war footing and returned to Terra himself with veteran companies to personally inform the Emperor. The Emperor made him Lord Commander of the Imperium, second only to the Emperor himself in authority, and Dorn was tasked with one mission, to make Terra unbreakable. For years, Dorn prepared. He reinforced the palace's defenses himself that he had already built. He fortified the entire Sol system. He created killing fields across Terra, turning humanity's birth world into the greatest fortress in existence. And when Horus finally came, when half the legions fell upon Terra with the full might of chaos behind them, those defenses held. For months, the siege raged, the greatest siege in human history, Primarch against Primarch, legion against legion. The fate of humanity decided on the walls that Dorn had built. Dorn didn't sleep. He didn't rest. For 3 months, he commanded the defense without a single moment of respite, his mind calculating angles and trajectories and defensive positions, while his body slowly broke down from exhaustion. He fought Fulgrim personally when the demon Primarch broke through at Saturnine. Dorn, in his humanity, matched the corrupt perfection of his fallen brother, not through power, but through his skills and determination. He landed mortal blows that would have killed a human Fulgrim, but the demon prince simply regenerated and laughed. Only with Sigismund's help did Dorn survive that battle. He organized defenses against the Legio Mortis, Titan legions that could crack continents. He set traps for Abaddon's elite Terminators. He turned every meter of the palace into a killing ground. And still, his defenses fell. Piece by piece, kilometer by kilometer, the traitors advanced. Dorn's perfect fortress was being cracked by Perturabo's perfect siege warfare. When Horus finally teleported to the Vengeful Spirit for the final confrontation with the Emperor, when Dorn realized his father was walking into a trap, he couldn't reach him in time. When it was over, Horus lay dead and the traitors had fled. Dorn found the Emperor's broken body aboard the Vengeful Spirit. He carried his father back to Terra, placed him upon the Golden Throne, received his last whispered instructions about how to rebuild the shattered Imperium, and then the Emperor fell silent forever. Dorn had built the greatest fortress in the galaxy, had created defenses that held against impossible odds, had done everything right, and his father still died. That failure broke something inside Rogal Dorn that would never heal. After the heresy, Dorn became consumed with grief and rage. He led the Imperial Fists on crusades against the fleeting traitor legions, pursuing them with merciless efficiency. But when Rogal Dorn returned to Terra with the Codex Astartes, proposing to break the legions into smaller chapters to prevent future betrayals, Dorn refused. The Imperial Fists were his sons. They were loyal. They had bled for the Emperor, and Guilliman wanted to divide them, to scatter them, to suggest that loyalty required limitations? Never. Other Primarchs took sides. Leman Russ stood with Dorn. Jagatai Khan and Korax supported Guilliman. The Imperium teetered on the edge of another civil war, this time between the Loyalists. The Imperial Navy even fired on the Imperial Fist strike cruiser. Dorn meditated on this, used the pain glove, a device that induced agony, to think clearly through suffering. And in that pain-induced clarity, he had a vision of the Emperor. The vision told him his legion needed redemption, that the path to salvation was through sacrifice and pain. So Dorn agreed to the Codex, but on his terms. The Imperial Fists would enter the pain glove together, metaphorically, and emerge reformed. The opportunity came when Perturabo built a fortress and challenged Dorn to break it. The Iron Cage, a 20-square-mile killing ground designed specifically to destroy the Imperial Fists. Perturabo had built it to mock Dorn, to prove once and for all who was really the superior siege master. And Dorn, knowing it was a trap, knowing that his legion would be slaughtered, went ahead and attacked anyway. Because he needed the pain, he needed the sacrifice, needed to punish himself and his sons for failing to save the Emperor. The Iron Warriors massacre that followed was exactly what Perturabo designed. The Imperial Fists were cut to pieces in kill zones, and crossfire lanes calculated with perfect mathematical precision. They would have been annihilated completely if Guilliman hadn't arrived with the Ultramarines and forced a rescue. Dorn finally relented, accepted the Codex, divided his legion into the Imperial Fists, the Black Templars, and the Crimson Fists. But he lost most of his warriors doing it. The legion spent the next 19 years just rebuilding their numbers. And the guilt, the knowledge that he led his sons to a slaughter because he couldn't accept being wrong, well, that never left him. For decades later, Dorn led what was remained of his chapter. He watched the Imperium change, watched it become the theocratic nightmare the Emperor had tried to prevent. People started calling the Primarchs demigods, started worshipping the Emperor as a god. Dorn protested. Of course he protested. He knew it was a lie. The Emperor wasn't a god, and the Primarchs weren't demigods. They were just weapons, tools. But his protests meant nothing. The ecclesiarchy rose anyway. Then came the First Black Crusade. Abaddon, the Despoiler, Horus' successor, led Chaos forces out of the Eye of Terror to attack Imperial space. Dorn saw the fleet while it was still assembling, saw the opportunity to strike before they were ready. But his main force, the Phalanx, was occupied shadowing the Eldar craft world Ulthwé. So Dorn took what forces he had, a vastly outnumbered strike force, and attacked anyway. It was brilliant. Hit-and-run attacks, boarding actions against ships when their shields were down, turning captured weapon batteries against other Chaos vessels, pure tactical genius. But the numbers were still overwhelming. One by one, Dorn's ships fell. The final battle took place against the Despoiler-class battleship, the Sword of Sacrilege. Dorn led a desperate boarding action against the bridge after an Imperial Fist cruiser rammed the vessel in a suicidal charge. And what happened next? Well, no one knows for certain. The only thing recovered was Dorn's hand, just his hand, now called the Fist of Dorn, preserved in stasis aboard the Phalanx as the chapter's holiest relic. The official story is that Rogal Dorn died there, fell in battle against the forces of chaos, and gave his life in service to the Imperium. But there are inconsistencies. The timing with Ulthwé is suspicious. Did the Eldar deliberately divert the Phalanx to ensure Dorn faced the Chaos fleets alone? Vulcan, during the War of the Beast, hinted that Dorn might still be alive. And here's the thing. They only found his hand. Not his body or his armor, just his hand. The Imperial Fists believe that their Primarch still lives, that he'll return when Terra faces its darkest hour. that Rogal Dorn was too stubborn to die. And you know what? They might be right. Because if anyone could survive 10,000 years through sheer inflexibility, through absolute refusal to accept defeat, it would have to be Rogal Dorn. 10,000 years later, the Imperial Fists endure exactly as their Primarch made them, absolutely unyielding, incapable of retreat, and masters of siege warfare and fortifications. They're organized according to the Codex Astartes that Dorn initially rejected, but they maintain their own traditions. The first company is called the Emperor's Shield. Each company has specialized rules that honor different aspects of their history. The second company bears the guilt of the War of the Beast, when the chapter was nearly annihilated and had to enact Dorn's secret Last Wall Protocol, calling on all successor chapters to reunite as a legion temporarily. The sixth company specializes in siege warfare. Formed by Dorn himself from Iron Cage survivors, they teach every Imperial Fist who passes through their ranks the art of breaking fortresses. The chapter maintains the Pain Glove tradition. When warriors need to make difficult decisions, when they need clarity through suffering, they enter the device and let the agony burn away any doubt. Imperial Fists are known for their inflexibility. They will hold a position to the last man rather than to retreat tactically. They see retreat as failure and any compromise as weakness. This has cost them dearly over the millennia. Entire companies wiped out because they refused to fall back. Opportunities lost because they couldn't adapt. But it's also made them legends. When you need a position held absolutely, when you need a fortress that will never fall, and when you need warriors who will die before they break, you'll call in the Imperial Fists. They've accepted Primaris Marines, though like all chapters, not without reservations. They've modernized their tactics while still maintaining their core identity. And they wait. Every Imperial Fist waits for the day their Gene Father returns, when Rogal Dorn comes back to lead them one final time. So, what kind of Primarch would return? Would the 10,000 years have taught Rogal Dorn flexibility? Or would he be even more rigid, even more uncompromising? Would he be the salvation the Imperium needs? Or would his inflexibility doom them all? So what can you learn from Rogal Dorn and his Imperial Fists? First, honesty without tact is cruelty. Dorn's inability to lie, to soften the truth, to consider how his words affected others, it destroyed relationships and created enemies. Truth is important, but so is how you deliver it. Being right doesn't excuse being hurtful. Second, perfectionism is a form of self-destruction. Dorn built the perfect fortress, and it fell anyways. He led the perfect defense, and his father died anyway. He tried to be perfect, and only achieved suffering. Excellence is achievable, but perfection isn't, so make sure you know the difference. Third, rigidity will break you. Dorn couldn't bend, couldn't compromise, couldn't adapt, and it led him to the iron cage, to sacrificing his sons for pride. Strength isn't about being unbending, it's about knowing when to flex. Bamboo survives the storm because it bends, but oak breaks. Fourth, guilt requires action, not punishment. After the Emperor's death, Dorn tortured himself, used the pain glove, led his warriors to a slaughter, but none of it could bring the Emperor back, and none of it fixed anything. If you failed, learn from it, improve from it, and don't punish yourself. That's just self-indulgence, pretending to be penance. Fifth, duty without purpose is just obsession. Dorn served the Emperor so completely that he couldn't imagine life after the service ended. When the Emperor fell, Dorn lost his meaning. Build your identity on principles, not on service to another person. Otherwise, their fall will also become your fall. And finally, being right doesn't mean you'll win. Dorn was right that the legions shouldn't be divided. He was also right that loyalty didn't require limitations. He was right that the Codex was also imperfect, but he was also very wrong to nearly start a civil war over it. Sometimes being right and being effective are two different things. Make sure you choose effectiveness. So there you have it. Rogal Dorn, the Praetorian of Terra, the Primarch who built the greatest fortress in the galaxy, and watched it fall. The Gene Father, who was so loyal that he forgot how to live. The Imperium will tell you he was perfect, the exemplar of duty, the ultimate defender, the Primarch who never wavered. But I saw something else. I see a man so rigid he'd rather break than bend, so honest he destroyed relationships through the truth, and so dutiful he forgot to even ask what his duty was for. He built perfect fortresses, but couldn't defend against his own inflexibility. He spoke perfect truth, but couldn't see how it wounded others. He served perfect loyalty, but couldn't adapt when that loyalty became obsession. And when he finally went on his last crusade, when he attacked that Chaos fleet, knowing the odds were impossible, was it bravery or was it suicide? Was Rogal Dorn trying to save the Imperium, or was he trying to escape the guilt of surviving when his father didn't? Maybe both. Maybe that's what duty becomes when it's all you have left, a reason to die nobly rather than to live with a failure. The Imperial Fists still wait for him, still believe their Primarch will return in Terra's darkest hour. They still maintain his traditions, his rigidity, and his absolute refusal to bend. And if he does return, if Rogal Dorn comes back after 10,000 years, he'll find an Imperium that's everything he fought against, a theocracy that worships his father as a god, a civilization that's built on lies and superstition, an empire that's rotting from the inside despite all the fortresses that he built. Could he adapt? Would he be able to finally learn flexibility? Or will he do what he's always done? Tell the uncomfortable truth, refuse to compromise, and break rather than bend? I suspect the latter. Because even though Rogal Dorn was many things, brilliant, loyal, capable, dedicated, he was never flexible. And you can't teach an old Primarch new tricks. So let the Imperial Fists maintain their walls. Let them hold their positions to the last man. And let them wait for their Gene Father to return and lead them to a glorious victory. Just remember, walls only protect you from external threats. They do nothing against the rot that's already inside. And the Imperium has been rotting for 10,000 years. That's all for now. Next time, perhaps we'll discuss another Primarch. Maybe one who understood that sometimes you have to tear down walls instead of building them. Anyways, the galaxy is full of lies. I'm still here, burning them away.